3 a.m., raw and jagged, pulling me from a dream I couldn't recall. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted upright, the dim glow of Brooklyn streetlights seeping through my window, casting long shadows across the room. Then I saw him, Mateo, my roommate, frozen at the edge of my bed, his hand hovering inches from my arm, his eyes wide with something I couldn't name. I don't know what shocked me more, the fact that I'd caught him touching me while I thought I was alone, or the way he didn't run, didn't flinch, just stared at me like he'd been caught stealing a piece of my soul. "Elliot, I can explain," he whispered, his voice trembling, but I was already scrambling back, the sheets tangling around my legs. My mind screamed betrayal, but my heart, stupid, reckless heart, noticed the way his fingers shook, the way his dark eyes glistened with something like guilt, or maybe something deeper. We'd been roommates for 8 months, sharing a cramped 2-bedroom in Bed-Stuy, splitting bills and takeout orders like any other pair of broke 20-somethings chasing dreams in New York. I'm Elliot Harper, 24, a graphic designer with a knack for overthinking and a closet full of thrift store flannels. Mateo Vargas, 25, is a barista by day, poet by night, with a laugh that could light up a room and a habit of leaving half-finished coffee mugs everywhere. We were friends, or so I thought, close enough to bicker over dishes, but not close enough for this. That night, I couldn't speak. I just pointed to the door, my throat tight, and Mateo left without another word, his footsteps heavy on the creaky floorboards. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door, his handwriting jagged and rushed. "Meet me at the cafe. I owe you the truth." I wanted to ignore it, to pack my things and flee this apartment that suddenly felt too small, too charged. But something in me, curiosity maybe, or the memory of his eyes, made me go. The cafe, a cozy spot called Brew Haven on Fulton Street, was our usual haunt. It smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, with mismatched chairs and walls plastered with local art. Mateo was already there, sitting by the window, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug. He looked different, smaller, almost his usual confidence replaced by a quiet intensity. "Elliot," he said as I sat down, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you, but I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound insane." I braced myself, expecting excuses, deflections. Instead, he slid a worn leather journal across the table. "Read this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's the only way you'll understand." My fingers hesitated, then flipped it open. The pages were filled with his poems, raw, vivid lines about longing, about a love he could never speak aloud. And then I saw my name, scrawled in a poem titled "In the Quiet of You." My breath caught. "Elliot, your laughter is a map I follow in the dark. I trace your shadow when you sleep, afraid to wake you, afraid to break this." I looked up, my chest tight. "What is this, Mateo?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. "I've been in love with you for months," he said, the words spilling out like they'd been trapped too long. "I know it's wrong what I did. I wasn't trying to, I couldn't help it. You were having a nightmare, thrashing in your sleep, and I wanted to calm you. I swear that's all it was. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, confusion, or something else entirely. Mateo wasn't just my roommate. He was the guy who'd stayed up with me binge-watching sci-fi shows, who'd laughed at my terrible cooking and left post-it notes with bad puns on the fridge. But this was a line crossed, a trust broken. Yet his confession, raw and unguarded, stirred something in me I wasn't ready to name. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, my voice cracking. He looked away, his jaw tight. "Because I was scared. Scared you'd hate me, Scared you'd leave. I've spent my whole life hiding who I am, Elliot. Growing up in a family that doesn't understand. I thought I could keep this buried. I wanted to yell, to tell him he'd betrayed me, but his words hit hard. I knew what it was like to hide. I'd come out as gay 2 years ago, after years of pretending for my conservative family back in Ohio. The weight of that secret had nearly crushed me, and looking at Mateo now, I saw that same weight in his eyes. I need time, I said finally, pushing the journal back toward him. I don't know what to think right now. He nodded, his face a mix of hope and fear. Take all the time you need, he said. Just don't shut me out. I left the cafe, the journal's words echoing in my head. Back at the apartment, I avoided him, sticking to my room, replaying that night, his touch, his confession. Part of me wanted to pack up and leave, to escape the mess of emotions tangling inside me. But another part, the part that noticed how his smile made my days brighter, how his voice felt like home, wanted to stay to understand. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the city's hum a faint pulse outside. I thought about Mateo's poems, about the way he'd looked at me, vulnerable and terrified, and I wondered if I was angry at him for crossing a line, or at myself for not seeing the truth sooner. The next few days were a tightrope walk. Our apartment, once a sanctuary of laughter and late-night talks, felt like a minefield. Mateo gave me space, his presence quiet but heavy, like a storm waiting to break. I'd catch glimpses of him, pouring coffee in the kitchen, scribbling in his journal on the fire escape, and my stomach would twist, caught between betrayal and something softer, something I wasn't ready to face. I threw myself into work, sketching logos for a client at my cluttered desk, but my mind kept drifting back to his confession. I've been in love with you for months. Those words were a splinter, lodged deep, impossible to ignore. I'd always prided myself on reading people, on noticing the unspoken, but I'd missed this. How had I missed this? On the 4th day, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I found Mateo in the living room, sprawled on the couch with a book he wasn't reading. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He sat up, his eyes wary but hopeful, like a kid waiting for a verdict. Okay, he said softly. I'm ready. I sat across from him, the coffee table a barrier between us. What you did, it wasn't okay. I started, my words sharp but measured. You don't touch someone like that, Mateo. Not without their consent. Not ever. He nodded, his face crumpling. I know. I hate myself for it. I wasn't thinking straight. I saw you hurting, and I wanted to help. His sincerity disarmed me, but I pressed on. You could have woken me up. You could have talked to me. Why didn't you? He ran a hand through his hair, his voice low. Because I'm a coward, Elliot. I've spent years hiding who I am. My family, my church, they made it clear being gay wasn't an option. I thought if I told you how I felt, I'd lose you. And this place, this life with you, it's the closest I've ever come to feeling free. His words hit like a punch. I knew that fear, that suffocating weight of hiding. Back in Ohio, I'd spent high school pretending to be someone I wasn't, dating girls I didn't love, dodging questions from my parents. Coming out had cost me their approval, but it had given me myself. Looking at Mateo, I saw someone still fighting that battle, still trapped in the closet he'd built to survive. I'm not saying I forgive you, I said, my voice softer now, but I get it. Hiding who you are, it messes with you. He looked up, his eyes glistening. Does that mean you don't hate me? He asked, almost pleading. I sighed, leaning back. I don't hate you, Mateo. I'm just confused. That night, we ordered pizza and ate in silence, but it wasn't the heavy silence of before. It was a start, a crack in the wall between us. Over the next week, we fell into a cautious rhythm. Small talk over coffee, shared glances that lingered too long. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way his hands moved when he talked about poetry, the way his laugh filled the room, and I hated how much I liked it. One evening, I found his journal left open on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't, but I read it. A new poem, titled after the fall. Your anger is a mirror, showing me my shame. But your eyes, they hold a light I want to name. My heart raced. I closed the journal, but the words stayed with me, burrowing deep. I started questioning myself. Was I angry at Mateo, or was I scared of what his feelings meant? I dated guys before, casual flings that fizzled fast. But this was different. Mateo wasn't just a roommate anymore. He was a question I didn't know how to answer. By the end of the week, I made a decision. I knocked on his door, my pulse pounding. He opened it wearing a faded band tee, his hair a mess. Can we go for a walk? I asked. He nodded, grabbing his jacket. We headed to Prospect Park, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet. The air was crisp, the city alive with distant sirens and laughter. Mateo, I said, stopping by a quiet bench. I've been thinking about what you said, about how you feel. He tensed, waiting. I don't know what I feel yet, I admitted, but I know I don't want to lose you. Not as a friend, not as whatever this could be. His face softened, a small smile breaking through. That's enough for now, he said. We sat on the bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The park became our refuge. Over the next few weeks, Mateo and I met there almost daily, walking the winding paths, talking about everything and nothing. We avoided the heavy stuff at first. His confession, my hesitation. But the air between us was charged. Every glance a spark, every laugh a step closer to something dangerous. One afternoon, as we sat by the lake, Mateo opened up about his past. My family's from Puerto Rico, he said, tossing a pebble into the water. Devout Catholics. When I was a kid, I knew I was different, but I didn't have the words for it. By high school, I figured it out, but coming out wasn't an option. My dad, he'd say things about sinners that made my skin crawl. I listened, my heart aching. Did you ever try to tell them? I asked. He shook his head. Once. I was 17. I told my mom I thought I might be gay. She cried for days, said she'd pray for me. I backtracked, said I was confused. I've been running from it ever since. I reached out, my hand brushing his. You're not running now, I said. He looked at me, his eyes soft but scared. Because of you, he whispered. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I wanted to close the distance between us, to feel his warmth against me. But I pulled back, the weight of his betrayal still lingering. Back at the apartment, things were shifting. We cooked dinner together one night, tacos his specialty, and laughed like we used to. But now, every touch, every shared smile, felt like a question. I caught myself watching him, noticing the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about poetry. It scared me, how much I wanted to let go, to lean into whatever this was. One night, he invited me to a poetry reading at a dive bar in Williamsburg. The place was packed, the air thick with cigarette smoke and anticipation. Mateo took the stage, his voice steady but vulnerable, reading a poem about a boy who loved in secret. His heart is a locked door, but the key is in his hands. The crowd snapped their fingers, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He was talking about me. Afterward, we walked home, the city buzzing around us. That was about you, he admitted, his voice low. I wrote it the night we talked at the cafe. I stopped, my heart pounding. Mateo, I feel something too, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. But I'm scared. You broke my trust, and I don't know how to get past that. He nodded, his face open, unguarded. I'll wait, Elliot, however long it takes. His honesty disarmed me, and for the first time, I let myself imagine what it would be like to kiss him, to let this spark ignite. The next day, I found a new note on the fridge. You're worth the wait. I smiled, my defenses crumbling. But that night, everything changed. I got a call from my sister, Claire, back in Ohio. Dad's sick, she said, her voice tight. Cancer. He wants to see you. The news hit like a tidal wave. My dad and I hadn't spoken since I came out. His silence a wound that never healed. Now he was dying and I had to face him. I told Mateo, expecting sympathy, but he offered more. I'll go with you, he said. You shouldn't do this alone. I hesitated, but the thought of facing my family without him felt unbearable. So we booked bus tickets to Ohio, the weight of the trip looming over us. As we packed, Mateo slipped his journal into his bag. In case I need to write, he said with a shy smile. I wondered what words he'd find there, in the place where I'd lost myself years ago. The bus ride was long, the hum of the engine a backdrop to our quiet conversations. Mateo told me about his dreams of publishing his poetry, of finding a way to be himself without fear. I told him about my dad, about the fights, the silence, the way I'd left Ohio feeling like a stranger in my own skin. When we reached my hometown, a small place called Millfield, the air felt heavy with memories. My childhood home looked the same, red brick, sagging porch, but it felt smaller, sadder. Mateo squeezed my hand as we walked up the steps, and I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Millfield was a ghost town of my past. Every street corner a reminder of the kid who'd hidden who he was. My dad's house smelled of antiseptic and old wood. The living room crowded with family I hadn't seen in years. My mom hugged me, her eyes wet, but my dad, frail in his recliner, barely looked at me. Elliot, he said, his voice rough, didn't think you'd come. Mateo stayed close, his presence a quiet anchor. I introduced him as my roommate, but my sister Claire's knowing glance told me she saw more. Over dinner, the conversation was stilted. My family tiptoeing around my life in New York, my identity. Mateo filled the silences, charming them with stories about the city, his easy laugh breaking the tension. That night, we shared a guest room, twin beds pushed against opposite walls. In the dark, Mateo whispered, "You okay?" I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight. "I don't know," I admitted. "He's dying, and he still can't say he loves me." Mateo reached across the gap, his hand finding mine. "He does in his way, but you don't need his love to be whole." His words stayed with me, a lifeline through the next few days. My dad and I talked, haltingly at first, about everything but the truth. Mateo was there, always, helping with dishes, reading poetry to my niece, giving me space to feel the weight of it all. One afternoon, I found him on the porch, writing in his journal. "What's this one called?" I asked, sitting beside him. He smiled, shy. "Elliot's Light." I didn't read it, not then, but I felt its weight. That night, my dad called me to his room. He looked small, his eyes tired but clear. "I was wrong," he said, his voice barely audible. "About you. I don't understand it, but I don't want to lose you." Tears burned my eyes, and I nodded, unable to speak. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. On the bus back to New York, I felt lighter, like I'd left some of my anger in Ohio. Mateo was quiet, his head resting against the window. "Thank you," I said, my voice low, "for coming with me." He turned, his eyes warm. "Always," he said. Back in Brooklyn, our apartment felt different, like we'd brought something back with us. I started letting my guard down, letting myself feel the pull toward Mateo. One night, we stayed up late, watching the city from the fire escape. "I'm ready to try," I said, my heart racing, "to see what this is." His smile was brighter than the skyline. We kissed for the first time that night, his lips soft and hesitant, the city humming below us. It wasn't perfect, but it was real and it was ours. Over the next few weeks, we navigated this new thing between us. Dates at the cafe, late-night talks, moments of quiet joy. But the memory of that night, his hand on me while I slept, still lingered, a shadow we couldn't ignore. One evening, I brought it up. "I need to know it won't happen again," I said, my voice steady. Mateo nodded, his eyes serious. "It won't, I swear. I'm learning to be honest, with you and with myself." His vulnerability broke something open in me, and I pulled him close, feeling the warmth of him, the truth of him. Our relationship bloomed slowly, like spring after a long winter. Mateo and I learned each other in new ways. His love for jazz, my obsession with vintage comics, the way we both craved late-night walks through the city. But it wasn't all easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, and there were moments when doubt crept in, when I'd wake up and wonder if I was enough for him, or if he was enough for me. One night, Mateo shared his biggest fear. We were in bed, the city quiet outside. "I'm scared I'll never be out," he said, his voice small. "That I'll always be half a person, hiding from my family, from the world." I held him, my heart aching. "You don't have to do it alone," I said. "I'm here." That promise carried us forward. Mateo started submitting his poems to journals, his words finding a home in the world. I watched him grow, his confidence building with every acceptance letter. And I grew too, letting go of the anger I'd carried, learning to love without fear. 6 months later, we stood in Brew Haven, the cafe where it all began. Mateo was reading at an open mic, his voice steady as he shared a new poem for Elliot. "You are the home I never knew I could have, / the truth I was too afraid to name." The crowd cheered, but I only saw him, my heart full. Afterward, he pulled me outside, the night air cool against our skin. "I'm ready," he said, his eyes bright, "to tell my family, to be me." I squeezed his hand, proud and terrified for him. "I'll be there," I said. Mateo's coming out was messy, painful, but liberating. His mom cried, but she hugged him, promising to try. His dad was silent, but Mateo stood tall, his truth finally free. Back in Brooklyn, we celebrated with cheap wine and a dance party in our living room, laughing until we couldn't breathe. Looking back, that night in my bedroom, when I caught him touching me, was a breaking point, a moment that could have ended us. But it didn't. It led us here, to a love built on honesty, on forgiveness, on the courage to be seen. Mateo's confession left me speechless, not because it was shocking, but because it was the beginning of something real, a story we're still writing together.